Welcome to Real News. I'm Mark Steiner. Now, as we speak here together, we may be witnessing the last gasps of the impeachment trial against Donald J. Trump. Most thought the outcome was predetermined before the House impeachment hearings even began. Now, today, Senator Lamar Alexander, close friend of U.S. Senate Leader McConnell, has decided to vote against allowing witnesses in. And not long before we began this conversation today, Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski said she would join him in voting against allowing witnesses, all but assuring that this charade of an impeachment trial is done and Trump will be acquitted. Now, polls show that 75% of Americans want witnesses to be called. But the new Republican Party, and clearly Republican senators, are more frightened of Trump and his minions than they are the shifting opinions of what polls can tell us. So let's assume that the inevitable, Trump is acquitted. What have you learned from this process? What do Bolton's revelations tell us now? What does it mean that those of us who want to blunt the rise of a racist nationalist right-wing movement and their arch conservatives coming into government, that we're now cheering on John Bolton and the John Boltons of this world and allying with the intelligence community and the establishment power brokers to push the impeachment of Trump? That will now not happen. So now what? Let's begin. We're here with Jeet Heer, who's the national affairs correspondent for The Nation, who just wrote another article on impeachment today. Good to have you back, Jeet, as always.
Yeah.
And once again with us again is Bill Black, associate professor of economics and law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, white-collar criminologist, former financial regulator, author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. And Bill, welcome back. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So let's just begin. Not knowing what was going to happen today, there were a lot of things that happened before. I want to cut through fast and then talk about what the consequences of all this might be. So let's take, first of all, I really want to talk to you all about this, and Bill, let you start with this one. This is Dershowitz at the podium defending Trump.
Every public official that I know believes that his election is in the public interest. And mostly you're right. Your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment. I quoted President Lincoln. When President Lincoln told General Sherman to let the troops go to Indiana so that they can vote for the Republican Party. Let's assume the president was running at that point, and it was in his electoral interest to have these soldiers put at risk the lives of many, many other soldiers who would be left without their company. Would that be an unlawful quid pro quo? No, because the president, A, believed it was in the national interest, but B, he believed that his own election was essential to victory in the Civil War. Every president believes that. That's why it's so dangerous to try to psychoanalyze a president, to try to get into the intricacies of the human mind. Everybody has mixed motives. And for there to be a constitutional impeachment based on mixed motives would permit almost any president to be impeached.
Well, Abe Lincoln might be rolling over in his grave. I don't know, Bill. So how do you respond to Mr. Dershowitz? And let's talk about what it means in a moment. But what about what he said?
Okay, so let's just start with the law. No. Everybody we sent to prison has mixed motives. Mixed motives is no defense. So as a matter of law, it's crazy time. I mean, it's not just wrong. It's just absolute crazy time. Second, criminology hat. What humans are great at, we're better at this than anything, is what we call in jargon neutralization techniques, which is to say, oh yeah, we did the crime, but we don't really think we should do the time. And we are really good at coming up with excuses. Third, a little historical note.
Okay.
Lincoln's opponent was this guy named McClellan, who had been the general of the armies and the Potomac, Army of the Potomac,
right,
and deeply beloved by his troops. And so when Lincoln said, release troops to be able to vote, that was very much thought at that time to be in the interest of his opponent. But hey, why let historical fact intervene?
Why? We shouldn't start that now. The other part of this too, Jeet, and let me bring you in here, is on this is that some people have looked at this speech that he made and other points that some of the other people have made in defense of Trump and show kind of the danger here of kind of the growing sense of, without even calling it that, authoritarianism is okay. The presidents can do as they will, that diminish the other branches. Maybe,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that's exactly the problem with the Dershowitz and with this whole impeachment, that what we're ending up with is the Republican Party, through Dershowitz and through the other lawyers, is embracing an extremely radical position on presidential power, where the president is basically a king and can do virtually nothing that is impeachable. I mean, if you actually look at, because the people always think that they're doing something that's in the public interest, right? Like, so you could say, well, if Trump thinks that, jailing Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren is in the public interest, who are we to say no? I mean, I don't, this is a very radical doctrine, and it's the most expansive view of presidential power that I've ever heard. And what's disturbing is that it's being embraced by one of the two big political parties.
So now let's take a look at this other clip real quickly. And this is interesting just because of what people think around this issue. This is Chief Justice Roberts reading the question that Senator Warren put forth.
The question from Senator Warren is for the House managers. At a time when large majorities of Americans have lost faith in government, does the fact that the Chief Justice is presiding over an impeachment trial in which Republican senators have thus far refused to allow witnesses or evidence contribute to the loss of legitimacy of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Constitution?
Now I play this again, Bill, not to get, as you might say, get lost in the weeds here, but there are a lot of people out there who think that Chief Justice Roberts, I just want to clear this up, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that Chief Justice Roberts is, in this position, he's acting as president of the Senate, or the head of the Senate at the moment. He can't unilaterally call witnesses. He has to let the Senate vote on whether to call witnesses, then call witnesses. Am I right?
Not clear.
Okay. Okay.
There's very little that's written in stone, but there is a super reality written in stone, and that is the Senate is in charge. So whatever the Chief Justice says, the Senate can overrule, and the Senate would have overruled, and it would have made, in the eyes of the Chief Justice, it looked like the court was, getting directly involved in the process in favor of one of the two political parties. So there is absolutely no way it was going to happen. There have been impeachments in which the Chief Justice has taken a more direct role, the Andrew Johnson impeachment process. But again, this is not a matter of legal precedent, and ultimately the Senate is in charge, and it was never going to allow it.
I just wanted to throw that out there just because I think there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I know these rules of impeachment have been, they exist, but they've not really been tested a lot, except for, presidentially, except for a few times in our history. So I thought it was important to throw. Do you want to add to that, Jeet, at all before we move on?
Yeah, no, obviously, if he had, called for witnesses, he would have been overturned. But I think that there's still, I think what the Warren's point is that he could have taken a stand, right? Like, even if you're going to lose, you take a stand and say, this is what the basic rule should be. This is what justice should be, and dare the Republicans in the Senate to overturn him. Now, the politically astute thing that he did is what he did was stay neutral. But I think, it was not a moment of courage for him.
So, and then before we get into the consequences of what is happening now, what could happen in the weeks to come because of this, from the beginning, many people have said, whether they agreed with the impeachment process or not, that it was never going to go anywhere. This is McConnell way back when, talking about what he was about to do.
We assume we're going to see 2 articles of impeachment, both of them pretty weak stuff. And everything I do during this, I'm coordinating with White House counsel. There will be no difference between the president's position and our position.
So, so from the beginning, or as we say from Jump Street, this was never going to happen. So the question becomes, where this impeachment takes us. I mean, clearly the acquittal vote, if it doesn't come tonight, it'll come on Monday. And it'll be over before he gives his State of the Union speech. So where does this process take? Well, let's you start first, G, with a political sense of this, and just get into it together. I mean, I think about what has it meant that progressives and people on the left and liberals have come together in a line with the likes and shouting yes to Bolton and saying, on the same side of folk in the intelligence establishment and others that they've taken on in the past. But so this is a very strange political moment.
Sure. There's a bunch of questions there, but I think one way to sort of look at this is that what the impeachment has achieved is it's tied the Republican Party to Trump and his corruption. That McConnell, is basically like the head of a jury who says, I've been in touch with the defendant and there's no daylight between me and the defendant. So if you think the defendant is guilty and the head of the jury was in cahoots with him, then you have to also think that the jury was guilty, or at least the majority of the jury that supported the defendant. And I think that's where it leaves us politically, that the Republicans, and especially with the sort of outlandish defense that Dershowitz offered, have really tied themselves to Trump's corruption and now can be judged by the voters on those terms. And I think that there's a lot of reporting evidence that people like Cory Gardner and Susan Collins are worried about this because they're living in places where Trump is unpopular. The second issue is, it is odd that John Bolton is so heavily involved in this, although I will note that he has been trying to have it both ways, to be a resistance hero with his book but not testify. And also, if you look at it as Bolton and Trump are still in agreement about almost everything. Bolton celebrated the killing of Soleimani in Iran. Right. And is very happy with the sort of, turning the screws even tighter on the Palestinians. I think that, so basically you have Trump and Bolton fighting, but it's a sort of kabuki dance. And Bolton is saying Trump is a gangster president who's using foreign policy for his own personal ends. And Trump responds, well, Bolton's a psychotic warmonger who wants World War III. Well, they're both right. You don't have to choose. You can say they're both right.
Bill?
Okay, so answering in part the second part first in all of this. Again, this has real resonance in terms of criminology. I won't go through the details, but on an anti-corruption gig I was doing for the World Bank in India, it would have been very easy to disguise the cartel for literally $4.50. And the folks didn't bother to do that. You should infer something from that, just as you should infer something critical from the fact that McConnell would openly say, I'm about to lie, and every Republican senator virtually is going to lie when they take this oath. Because, in fact, we have absolutely no intention of being impartial. Indeed, we're not simply not impartial, we are completely committed to the other side of this issue. And we don't care anymore about saying it openly. And McConnell, of course, does this not because he's stupid, but because he is signaling to Fox News, just as a couple of days ago he signaled, hey, I may not have the votes to stop this vote.
That's right.
And immediately Fox News jumps in and goes into, for example, rants against Romney. Not because it's going to affect Romney's vote, but to show you scorched earth. If you have any courage or integrity, we will destroy you, right? And we're going to be absolutely open about that. Similarly, now basically ask the question, why is someone like Bolton willing to go into the Trump administration? Bolton is a smart person, whatever you think about his politics. He's a Yale law grad type of thing. he, in fact, has read widely and all those good types of things. He knew absolutely that Trump was a sleazy, lazy, corrupt guy. Bolton went in to use that to achieve his policies. And he left, his frustration was other sleazy, corrupt people were better than him at getting Trump to do their bidding. And ultimately, Trump was going to not do key aspects of Trump's bidding because North Korea dictator sends these oversized love grams to Trump. And Trump actually thinks that means something, right? He is such a complete narcissist, and Bolton is
Right.
unwilling to do the complete narcissism fawning game in all of this. Then for your first question, it's perfectly sensible. It makes a lot of sense to quote people, have their testimony when they are largely supporters of the president. If even they say, this guy told me on multiple occasions that he was extorting the Ukrainians for the sole purpose of getting this manufacturing dirt or simply the announcement of investigation of the Bidens, and he ordered to me to be part of it as well. Well, that's particularly damning testimony. And you simply cannot assume that because someone is conservative or liberal, that as a fact witness or percipient witness, they will lie. Very large numbers of people, regardless of ideology, will tell the truth.
So just to conclude this, I think it's important here to grab a hold of something that you alluded to in what you just said, Bill. I mean, if you take the Quinnipiac poll that just came out, with 75% of Americans said they want witnesses, but if I have this correct, 52% of them said wanted him impeached, but that was just...
No, removed.
So, what'd you say, Jeet?
And removed.
And removed.
They want impeached and removed.
Right.
The actual, I think, numbers for impeachment are higher than
Right.
impeachment and removal.
So the question becomes then, what's the political consequence of these impeachment hearings and this trial that took place in the Senate? I mean, it's because it's come to nothing. So, and politically, we're in the same place we were, and the divide is even deeper, and the war seems to have intensified and will intensify. So where does all this take us, Jeet?
Well, as I said, I do think that it gives the Democrats a lot of very solid points to go after, not just Trump, but the Republican Party for this corruption. And furthermore, everything can still continue. The House can still continue to investigate. Bolton is still out there. His testimony, they didn't want to hear it, but it's actually going to be a book. The testimony will be a New York Times bestseller. And that will also have an impact. So I feel like if Bolton had a bombshell, but it's a bombshell that's going to take time to explode, but it will explode.
Okay, Bill, in a few minutes we have left, what are your closing thoughts on this?
Southern District of New York. Southern District of New York is sitting on evidence under which they could easily indict Giuliani. Is that going to happen?
We'll find out. And gentlemen, I look forward to maybe talking to you both in the coming weeks and just see how this unfolds and where it takes us politically as a country and where this struggle for the presidency takes us in light of all this. And Jeet here and Bill Black, always a pleasure to talk to both of you individually. Great to have you both on at the same time. Thank you so much for being with us and have a great weekend.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Great. Always.
And I'm Mark Steiner here of the Real News Network. Thank you all for joining us. Let us know what you think. We'll keep this discussion going. Take care.